I am 26 years old and I married my husband, Liam, on a sunny Saturday in June. The day was supposed to be perfect. We had saved for 2 years to make it happen. Every detail was planned, from the flowers to the music. I thought we had anticipated everything. I was wrong. The one thing I had not prepared for was my mother-in-law, Margaret. She had always been a little cold to me. There were small comments here and there, a remark about my cooking, a question about my career choice that sounded more like a judgment. I always brushed them off. I told myself she was just protective of her only son. I told Liam about it a few times, but he would always say the same thing. That's just how she is. She doesn't mean anything by it. I tried to believe him. I wanted a peaceful family. I wanted everyone to get along. So I smiled, I was polite, and I kept my feelings to myself. The wedding ceremony was beautiful. We said our vows, and I felt a wave of pure happiness wash over me. Looking at Liam, I believed that everything would be okay. We were a team now. We could handle anything together. The reception started and the mood was joyful. Our friends and family were laughing and dancing. My parents looked so proud. My father gave a sweet, funny speech that made everyone tear up a little. Then it was time for the groom's parents to speak. Liam's father, Robert, said a few kind words. He welcomed me to the family and wished us a lifetime of happiness. It was short and sincere. Then he handed the microphone to Margaret. A hush fell over the room. She stood there beaming, but her eyes had a glint I had learned to mistrust. She started by talking about Liam's childhood. She shared a few funny stories that made people chuckle. It all seemed normal, maybe even nice. I started to relax. I thought maybe I had misjudged her. Maybe today, on our wedding day, she would finally show me some warmth. She raised her glass of champagne. "I want to propose a toast," she said, her voice carrying through the room. "To my son, Liam." She paused, looking directly at him with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "To my son, who finally made a good choice." The words hung in the air. A few people clapped uncertainly. The rest of the room was silent. I felt my face flush with heat. A good choice. Finally. The implication was clear. I was a choice, not a person. And I was only a good one after a series of presumed bad ones. Every woman he had ever dated before me was insulted. And I was not being celebrated as his partner, but as his latest and supposedly best acquisition. I looked at Liam. He was smiling, oblivious. He just heard the good choice part and took it as a compliment. He raised his glass to his mother. My heart sank. I felt small and humiliated in front of everyone I knew. I felt a lump form in my throat. I wanted to disappear. I stared down at my plate, trying to hold back tears. The silence was deafening. And then I heard a chair scrape back. I looked up. It was my mother, Helen. She was standing up. She was a quiet woman, never one to make a scene. But she was standing. She picked up her own glass of water. "I would also like to propose a toast," she said. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the tension like a knife. Every eye in the room turned to her. Margaret's smile faltered. She looked annoyed. My mom looked directly at me, and her eyes were filled with a fierce love that made me feel strong again. "To my daughter, Chloe," she began, "who has always been a good choice. She is intelligent, she is kind, and she is strong. She is a wonderful person, and any man would be lucky to have her." Then she turned her gaze to Liam. It was not unkind, but it was direct. "Liam, you are a very lucky man. I hope you always remember that." She took a sip of her water and sat back down. A wave of applause, real and warm this time, erupted through the room. My bridesmaids started cheering. My aunts and uncles were all smiling. They understood. They had seen the insult, and they had seen my mother defend me. I looked over at Margaret. Her face was pale with fury. She had been publicly corrected. She slowly sat down, her lips pressed into a thin, hard line. Liam finally seemed to notice that something was wrong. He looked from his mother's angry face to my mother's calm one, and then to me. I had tears in my eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. My mom had stood up for me when my new husband had not even noticed I needed defending. The rest of the night was a blur. I tried to enjoy it, but the confrontation had cast a long shadow. Later that night, in our hotel room, Liam brought it up. "What was that all about with our moms?" he asked. He was untying his tie, looking more confused than anything else. "What do you mean?" I asked. I was already feeling defensive. "My mom gives a nice toast, and your mom gets up and says all that stuff. It was kind of weird. It made my mom feel bad," he said. I stared at him in disbelief. "A nice toast? Liam, she insulted me. She implied I was just another one of your choices and that you finally got it right." "What?" "No, she did not," he said, shaking his head. "She was just saying she approves of you, that she thinks you're a good choice for me. It's a compliment." "It was not a compliment," I said, my voice rising. The way she said it, "finally made a good choice," was meant to put me down. To make it about her approval of you, not about our marriage. My mom saw it. Everyone saw it. "No, you're being too sensitive," he said, dismissing my feelings with a wave of his hand. "That's just how my mom talks. You know that. Your mom shouldn't have made such a big deal out of it. It was embarrassing." I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. He was defending her. He was taking her side. On our wedding night. "She embarrassed me, Liam. And you didn't even notice?" I said quietly. "There was nothing to notice," he insisted. "You're starting drama over nothing." We argued for another hour. It was the worst possible start to a marriage. I eventually gave up, exhausted and heartbroken. I cried myself to sleep while my new husband slept soundly beside me, convinced his mother had done nothing wrong. I realized then that Margaret was not just a difficult mother-in-law. She was a problem, and my husband was not my ally. He was her enabler. The battle that started at my wedding was far from over. It was just the beginning. Our honeymoon was supposed to be in Hawaii, 2 weeks of sun and sand, but the fight from our wedding night followed us there. Every time I tried to bring up how hurt I was, Liam would shut down. He would say I was ruining the trip by dwelling on the past. He wanted to pretend nothing had happened. So I tried. I really did. I smiled for the pictures. I went snorkeling. I walked on the beach. But there was a wall between us now. A small crack had formed in the foundation of our new life together, and I was terrified it would only get wider. When we got back home, reality set in. We had to unpack, go back to work, and start our lives. We also had a big goal. We had been saving for a down payment on a house. We had a joint savings account where we had both been contributing for years. My parents had also given us a very generous wedding gift, a large sum of money specifically for the house fund. It was enough to finally get us over the top. We were planning to start looking at houses in the next month. A week after we returned, I sat down at my computer to look at our finances and move my latest paycheck into the savings account. I logged into the bank's website. I clicked on the joint savings account. The page loaded. I looked at the balance. My breath caught in my throat. It was wrong. It was very wrong. A huge amount of money was gone. To be precise, $50,000 was missing. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. I refreshed the page, thinking it had to be a mistake. A glitch in the system. The number stayed the same. I clicked on the transaction history. There it was. A single wire transfer for $50,000 made 3 days ago. The recipient was listed simply as M. Davis. My mother-in-law's name was Margaret Davis. I felt sick to my stomach. This could not be happening. There had to be an explanation. Maybe Liam had moved it to a different account for a better interest rate. Maybe he had bought some stocks. He would have told me, though. We always discussed large financial decisions together. That was the rule. I waited for him to get home from work, my anxiety growing with every minute that passed. The moment he walked through the door, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Liam, we need to talk," I said. My voice was shaking. He saw the look on my face and his smile faded. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I was looking at our savings account, the one for the house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's $50,000 missing." His face went pale. He didn't look surprised. He looked guilty. And in that moment, I knew. He knew where the money was. "Oh," he said quietly. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "About that, I was going to tell you." "Tell me what, Liam?" "Where is our down payment?" I demanded. He finally looked at me. "I had to lend it to my mom," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "She had an emergency." I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. "You what?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "You lent our house money to your mother? Without asking me?" "I didn't want to worry you," he said, trying to sound reasonable. "It was a real emergency. Her roof started leaking really badly. It was a huge mess. She needed to get it fixed right away, and she was a little short on cash." "A little short?" "She was $50,000 short?" I asked, incredulous. "That's our entire future, Liam. That was the gift from my parents." "She's going to pay it back," he insisted. "She promised, as soon as her insurance check comes through. It's just a loan, Chloe. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal," I was shouting now. "You gave away our savings without my permission. You broke my trust. You broke our agreement. How could you do that?" "She's my mother," he yelled back. "I couldn't just let her house get ruined. What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to talk to me," I screamed. "We are married. It's our money. You don't just get to make a decision like that on your own." The fight was worse than the one on our wedding night. It went on for hours. He accused me of not caring about his family. I accused him of betraying me. He kept saying it was a loan, that we would get the money back. But something about his story didn't feel right. A roof repair? $50,000. It seemed excessive. And the way he was so defensive, so quick to protect his mother, it made me suspicious. That night, I slept on the couch. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. The trust I had in my husband was shattered, and a dark suspicion began to grow in my mind. Margaret was not just a cold woman who made insulting speeches. She was manipulative. And I was starting to believe she had just stolen our future right out from under us, with her son's willing help. I knew I couldn't just take his word for it. I had to find out the truth. My marriage might depend on it. The next few days were filled with a tense, cold silence. Liam and I were like two strangers living in the same house. He acted as if I was the one who had done something wrong, as if my anger was an overreaction. He wanted me to apologize, to accept his decision, and to move on. But I couldn't. The image of that bank transaction was burned into my mind. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the lie of omission, the total disregard for me as his partner. His story about the roof kept replaying in my head. It felt too dramatic. Too convenient. Margaret and Robert lived in a nice house, but it wasn't a mansion. A $50,000 roof repair seemed incredibly high unless the entire thing had collapsed. Liam had said it was an emergency leak. I decided I needed to know more. I couldn't confront Margaret directly. She would just lie, and Liam would believe her. I needed to be smarter. I thought about who in his family might give me a straight answer without immediately reporting back to Margaret. My mind landed on Liam's aunt, Carol. She was Margaret's younger sister, but they were very different. Carol was warm and down to earth. She had always been kind to me. She and Margaret had a somewhat strained relationship, which I thought might work in my favor. She would be less likely to be part of a cover-up. I waited until the middle of the day, when I knew she would be home from her part-time job at the library. I took a deep breath and dialed her number. My hands were clammy. "Hello?" Carol's cheerful voice answered. "Hi, Carol, it's Chloe," I said, trying to sound casual. "Chloe, how are you, dear? How was the honeymoon?" she asked warmly. "It was great, thanks for asking," I lied. "Listen, I was just calling to check in on Margaret and Robert. Liam mentioned there was some trouble at their house. Oh? Carol sounded surprised. Trouble? I just talked to Margaret yesterday. She didn't mention anything. She was going on about her garden club. This was my opening. Oh, that's strange, I said, feigning confusion. Liam said there was a terrible emergency with the roof. A really bad leak. He said it was going to cost a fortune to fix. I was so worried about them. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A roof leak? Carol repeated slowly. Chloe, that can't be right. Their roof is brand new. They had the whole thing replaced last year. Robert was so proud of it. He talked about the new shingles for a month straight. A cold certainty washed over me. I knew it. I knew it was a lie. Oh, I said, letting a note of relief enter my voice. Well, that's wonderful news. I must have misunderstood Liam. You know how things get mixed up. I'm sure that's it, Carol said, but she sounded thoughtful. It's funny, though. You'd think Margaret would have mentioned something so dramatic. Well, I'm just glad they're okay. Thanks for letting me know, Carol. I feel so much better, I said. Anytime, dear. Say hello to Liam for me, she replied. I hung up the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a lie. A deliberate, calculated lie. There was no roof repair. So where did our $50,000 go? And was Liam in on the lie? Or was he a victim of it too? I wanted to believe he had been duped, that his mother had manipulated him. But the way he had defended her, the way he had refused to listen to me, made me doubt him. That evening, I decided to confront him, not with anger, but with facts. I waited until after dinner. He was watching TV, pretending everything was normal. I sat down on the couch next to him and muted the volume. Liam, we need to talk about the money again, I said calmly. He sighed dramatically. Chloe, can we not do this again? I told you she's going to pay it back. I spoke to your Aunt Carol today, I said, watching his face carefully. He looked wary. Okay, and? I asked her about your mom's roof. I told her I was worried about the emergency leak, I continued, and she told me something interesting. She said your parents got a brand new roof last year. Liam's face went blank for a second. Then he quickly recovered. Right. Well, it wasn't the main roof, he said, stumbling over the words. It was the garage roof. Yeah, the garage roof. That's separate. It's a flat roof. They have a lot of problems. He was lying. I could see it in his eyes. He was making it up on the spot, but he was sticking to the story. It was incredible. The garage roof costs $50,000 to fix? I asked, my voice flat. It was a huge job. There was water damage to the structure. Look, I don't know all the technical details, he said, his voice rising in frustration. My mom was upset. She needed help and I helped her. Why is that so hard for you to understand? What's hard to understand is the lying, I shot back. You weren't honest with me, and now you're changing your story. I'm not changing the story. You're the one interrogating my family, he accused. You called my aunt to check up on my mom? What is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? I was on my feet now. I want to know where the money for our future went, Liam. And I want the truth. You want the truth? Fine, he yelled. He grabbed his phone from the coffee table. I'll call her right now and you can hear it from her yourself. Then maybe you'll stop acting like a crazy person. He dialed her number and put it on speakerphone. My heart pounded. I couldn't believe he was doing this. It was a showdown. Liam, darling, is everything okay? Margaret's smooth voice filled the room. Hey, Mom. Yeah, everything's fine, he said, shooting me a triumphant look. I just have Chloe here, and she was a little confused about the roof repair. She was talking to Aunt Carol. There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause. Oh, Carol. Margaret said with a light, dismissive laugh. You know how she gets things mixed up. She probably thought I meant the house roof. Silly thing. Yeah, that's what I told her, Liam said, nodding at me as if to say, see? I was right. No, darling, it wasn't the main roof, of course not. That one is perfect, Margaret continued, her voice dripping with false sincerity. It was the garage roof, a complete disaster. The whole thing had to be rebuilt, but it's all taken care of now thanks to my wonderful, supportive son. You really saved us, Liam. See? Liam said to me, his voice smug. I told you. Thank you for clarifying, Margaret, I said, my voice icy. We were so worried. Oh, it's nothing to worry your pretty little head about, dear, she cooed. It's all handled. Now I have to run. Talk to you soon, darlings. She hung up. Liam turned off the speakerphone and tossed the phone back on the table. He crossed his arms, looking at me expectantly. There. Are you satisfied now? Can we please drop this? I just stared at him. I wasn't satisfied. I was horrified. They were in it together. They had their story straight. She was a phenomenal liar, and he backed her up without a second thought. This was no longer just about missing money. This was a conspiracy against me and our marriage. And I was standing completely alone. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said quietly. We can drop it. But in my heart, I knew I was only just beginning to fight back. I would not let them get away with this. I would find out the truth, no matter what it took. The next week was a performance. I acted like I had accepted the situation. I apologized to Liam for overreacting. I told him I was sorry for doubting him and his mother. He was so relieved that he immediately forgave me, eager to return to a state of comfortable denial. He thought he had won. He thought the issue was resolved. He had no idea that my mind was working harder than ever before. I was playing a role, the dutiful wife who had seen the error of her ways. Inside, I was a detective, gathering clues and searching for a motive. Why would Margaret need $50,000? And why would she lie so elaborately to get it? If she and Robert were in financial trouble, wouldn't they have asked for help more openly? It didn't make sense. The lie was too specific, too theatrical. It was designed to create a story that Liam would believe, a story of emergency and family duty. It was also designed to be something I couldn't easily verify. They hadn't counted on me calling Aunt Carol. My first thought was debt. Maybe Margaret had a gambling problem or was hiding massive credit card bills from Robert. It was possible. She always wore expensive clothes and seemed very concerned with appearances. But it was just a theory. I had no way to prove it. I needed more information. I needed to get inside their house. An opportunity came up that weekend. Liam mentioned that his dad needed help moving some old furniture out of the basement. Mom wants to turn it into a craft room, he said. Dad asked if I could come over Saturday to give him a hand. He looked at me hesitantly. You don't have to come if you don't want to. He was still walking on eggshells around me when it came to his parents. No, I'd love to come, I said with a bright, fake smile. I can help Margaret with the planning for the craft room. It'll be fun. Liam looked pleased. That's great, Chloe. I think Mom would really like that. It'll show her we're all moving past that awkwardness. The awkwardness. That's what he called his mother stealing our future. I just nodded and smiled. Of course. On Saturday, we drove over to their house. Robert and Liam went straight down to the basement, and I was left in the kitchen with Margaret. She was surprisingly gracious, offering me coffee and acting as if we were the best of friends. It was unnerving. I'm so glad you came, Chloe, she said, stirring her coffee. I have so many ideas for the craft room. I was thinking of a nice floral wallpaper here, and maybe some built-in shelves over there. We talked about paint colors and storage solutions for about half an hour. I was bored out of my mind, but I feigned enthusiasm. I was waiting for my chance. I knew Robert had a small home office just off the living room. Margaret rarely went in there. It was his space. But she was known for being messy, leaving bills and mail piled up on any available surface. "Would you mind if I use the restroom?" I asked, standing up. "Of course not, dear. Down the hall to the left," she said, already distracted by a catalog of sewing machines. I walked down the hall, but instead of turning left, I took a sharp right into the office. My heart was thudding. I knew I only had a minute or two. The office was cluttered, just as I'd expected. There were stacks of paper on the desk, on the chair, on the floor. I scanned the room quickly. I was looking for anything out of place, anything that could give me a clue. My eyes landed on a small pile of mail on the corner of the desk. Most of it was junk mail and bills addressed to Robert. But at the bottom of the pile, there was a thick, glossy envelope made of expensive paper. It was addressed to Margaret. The return address was for something called Elysian Travels. It looked like a high-end travel agency. My hands trembled as I carefully slid the envelope out from under the others. It wasn't sealed. I pulled out the contents. It was a multi-page, detailed itinerary. My eyes scanned the first page. It was for a 3-week first-class tour of Europe, Italy, France, and Switzerland. The dates of travel were set for next month. There were reservations for 5-star hotels, private guided tours, and tickets for cooking classes and wine tastings. It was an incredibly extravagant trip. Then I saw the passenger information. There were 2 names listed. The first was Margaret Davis. The second was not Robert Davis. It was a woman named Joan Miller. I vaguely recognized the name. Joan was one of Margaret's friends from her bridge club, a wealthy widow. My blood ran cold. I flipped to the last page. It was the financial summary. The total cost of the trip was staggering. And there, near the bottom, was a line item. Deposit paid via wire transfer. The amount was $50,000, the exact amount missing from our savings account. I felt a dizzying wave of rage and betrayal. There was no debt. There was no emergency. There was only this. She had stolen our down payment, our dream of buying a home to fund a luxury vacation for herself and her friend. She had lied to her son, manipulated him, and turned him against me, all for a trip. And Liam's father, Robert, clearly had no idea. His name wasn't on the itinerary. I heard footsteps in the hall. Panicked, I quickly shoved the documents back into the envelope and slid it back into the pile, trying to make it look exactly as it had before. I slipped out of the office just as Margaret was coming out of the kitchen. "There you are," she said. "I was about to come looking for you." "Sorry," I said, my voice sounding surprisingly normal. "Just washing my hands." She didn't seem to suspect a thing, but I couldn't stay there a moment longer. I felt like I was suffocating. I went to the top of the basement stairs. "Liam," I called down. "I'm not feeling very well. I think I have a migraine coming on. Do you mind if we go home?" Liam came upstairs, his face full of concern. "Oh no, of course not. Dad and I are almost done here anyway." The car ride home was silent. Liam kept asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. I just shook my head and stared out the window. The image of that itinerary burned into my brain. He thought I had a headache. He had no idea that my entire world had just tilted on its axis. The lie was so much bigger and more selfish than I could have ever imagined. When we got home, I went straight to our bedroom and closed the door. I needed to think. I had the proof now. Hard, undeniable proof. But what was I going to do with it? If I showed it to Liam, what would happen? Would he finally believe me? Or would he find a new way to excuse her behavior? She was going to tell Dad about the trip. She was going to pay us back from other savings. I could already hear the excuses forming. And what about Robert? This would devastate him. His wife was stealing from their son and planning a secret, extravagant vacation with another woman. It was a mess. I sat on the edge of our bed, feeling a profound sense of loneliness. I had uncovered the truth, but the truth was a weapon, and I had to decide how and when I was going to use it. This was no longer just about getting our money back. This was about justice. This was about exposing Margaret for the cruel, selfish manipulator she was. I decided I wouldn't confront Liam right away. I needed a better plan. A public confrontation had started this war at my wedding. Maybe a public confrontation was the only way to end it. I just needed to set the stage perfectly. Margaret liked to be the center of attention. I decided I would give her exactly what she wanted. The discovery of the travel itinerary changed everything. My anger cooled into a hard, sharp resolve. I was no longer just a hurt wife. I was a woman with a mission. But I knew that simply presenting the evidence to Liam might not be enough. He was so deeply conditioned to defend his mother that he might try to minimize it, to reframe it as another misunderstanding. Margaret would spin a new web of lies, and I would be back at square one, looking like the crazy, suspicious wife. I needed more than just the what. I needed the why. Why go to such extreme lengths? Why not just ask for the money? Why invent such a dramatic, easily disprovable lie about the roof? It felt personal. It felt like an attack aimed directly at me. My mind went back to the wedding speech. To my son, who finally made a good choice. It was a statement of ownership. Liam was her son, and his choices were subject to her approval. By marrying him, I hadn't just joined a family. I had disrupted a power dynamic. She saw me as a rival for her son's affection, loyalty, and apparently his finances. I decided I needed to talk to someone else in the family, someone who had seen Margaret's true colors before. Aunt Carol had been helpful, but she was still Margaret's sister. There was a limit to how much she would say against her own sibling. Then I thought of Liam's cousin, Sarah. She was the daughter of Robert's brother. Sarah was a few years younger than us. A quiet, artistic type whom Margaret had always treated with a kind of casual disdain. Margaret found her unimpressive. She wasn't a doctor or a lawyer. She was a graphic designer. Margaret made little digs about her hobby job at family gatherings. I realized that Sarah, having been on the receiving end of Margaret's cruelty, might be an ally. I sent her a message on social media asking if she wanted to get coffee. She seemed surprised but agreed immediately. We met at a small cafe downtown a few days later. "So, what's up?" Sarah asked after we ordered. "It's nice to see you outside of a forced family holiday." I laughed. "You can say that again." I decided to be direct. There was no point in beating around the bush. "Sarah, I need to ask you something about your Aunt Margaret, and I need you to be honest with me." Her friendly expression turned serious. "Okay," she said slowly. "This sounds heavy." "It is," I admitted. "Have you ever known her to, I don't know, bend the truth? To manipulate situations to get what she wants?" Sarah let out a short, bitter laugh. "Have I ever known the sun to rise in the east?" "Chloe, my Aunt Margaret is the queen of manipulation. She's been doing it my whole life. She pits people against each other. She tells different people different stories. She plays the victim whenever she's called out on anything." "Why are you asking?" I took a deep breath. I didn't want to reveal everything. Not yet. I decided to give her a piece of the puzzle. She told Liam and me that she needed a lot of money for an emergency roof repair. A very specific, large amount of money. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "Let me guess. The garage roof." I stared at her, stunned. "How did you know that?" "Because she used the same story on my parents about 5 years ago," Sarah said, shaking her head in disgust. "She needed money for some investment, but she told my dad the garage roof had catastrophic damage." "My dad is a contractor. He went over to look at it and there was nothing wrong with it. He called her out and she didn't speak to him for a year. She told the rest of the family he was being cruel to her during a crisis." I felt a surge of validation. It was a pattern. This was her go-to lie. "She told us the same thing. And Liam believed her," I said quietly. "Of course he did," Sarah said, her voice softening with pity. "Liam's a good guy, but he's been blinded by her his whole life. She's got him wrapped around her little finger. He thinks she's this perfect, selfless mother, and he can't see the puppet strings. She said something at my wedding, I continued, feeling more comfortable opening up to her. She toasted to Liam finally making a good choice. Sarah winced. Ouch. Yeah, that sounds like her. Backhanded, public, and designed to make you feel small. She did something similar when my cousin Mark got married. She complimented his wife on being surprisingly intelligent for a cheerleader. In the wedding speech. We sat in silence for a moment, a shared understanding passing between us. She hates losing control, Sarah finally said. And when Liam married you, she lost a huge amount of control over him. You became his number one person. She can't stand that. She sees you as a threat. This was it. This was the why. So what do you think this is about? I asked. The money, the lie, what is she trying to do? Sarah leaned forward, her eyes intense. I'll tell you what I think. I think this is a test. My mom once overheard her talking to one of her friends. Margaret was complaining about Liam spending so much time with you before the wedding. She said she was going to have to test you to see if you were really family material or just some gold digger after their money. She said she had a plan to see where his loyalties really lie. A chill went down my spine. A test, I repeated. Yes, Sarah confirmed. Create a crisis. Make him choose between his mommy and his wife. If he chooses her, she wins. She proves she's still the most important woman in his life. If he chooses you, well, she'd probably find a way to spin that too. But taking your house money? That's next level. She's not just testing you. She's trying to break you up. She wants to create a fight so big that your marriage can't recover. She wants you gone, Chloe. It all clicked into place. The wedding speech was the opening salvo. The theft of our money was the main attack. The lie about the roof was the cover story. And the luxury vacation? That was her victory lap. She was planning to celebrate the destruction of my marriage with a first-class trip to Europe. I felt a wave of cold fury. This wasn't just selfish. It was evil. It was a deliberate, premeditated plot to ruin my life because she felt threatened. What are you going to do? Sarah asked gently. I looked at her, my decision solidifying. I'm going to expose her, I said. I'm going to set a stage she can't escape from, and I'm going to burn her little kingdom to the ground. Sarah looked at me, a slow smile spreading across her face. Well, she said, taking a sip of her coffee. It's about time someone did. Let me know how I can help. I left that cafe with a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't just fighting for my money or my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my dignity. I was fighting back against a bully who had underestimated her target. Margaret wanted a war. I was going to give her one she would never forget. My plan began to take shape. I knew a private confrontation would be useless. Margaret was a master of deflecting, gaslighting, and playing the victim in one-on-one situations. Liam, as the sole audience, would be susceptible to her emotional manipulation. No, this had to be public. It had to be in front of the very people she cared about most. The family she had built her matriarchal identity around. She craved their respect and admiration. I was going to take it from her. I needed the right setting. A holiday was too predictable. A birthday party felt wrong. It had to be an event of my own creation, one where I controlled the guest list and the timing. A few days later, I approached Liam. He was in the living room reading a book. The tension between us had eased since I'd apologized, but there was still a distance. He was relieved, but I was just biding my time. Hey, I said, sitting next to him. I've been thinking. About what? He asked, putting his book down. About us. And your family, I said, choosing my words carefully. I feel like things have been so tense since the wedding. I feel bad about how I reacted to the whole thing with the money. I know your mom was just in a tough spot, and I shouldn't have been so accusatory. It tasted like poison to say it, but it was a necessary part of the trap. Liam's face softened. It's okay, Chloe. It was a lot of money. I get why you were upset. I should have talked to you first. I've been thinking about that a lot. Well, I want to make it right, I said. I want to show your mom that there are no hard feelings. I was thinking, maybe we could host a nice dinner party. For both of our families, a kind of post-wedding, let's all come together celebration. My parents, your parents, maybe Aunt Carol and Uncle David and Sarah. His eyes lit up. This was exactly what he wanted to hear. He wanted peace. He wanted his wife and his mother to get along. He saw this as me extending a huge olive branch. Chloe, that's a fantastic idea, he said, pulling me into a hug. Really? You'd be okay with that? I'd love to, I said, hugging him back while my mind raced. It's time we all moved on and acted like a family. I'll call my mom right now, he said excitedly, reaching for his phone. She will be so thrilled. Of course she would be thrilled. She would see it as a total surrender on my part. She would think she had won. She would walk into my house feeling smug and victorious, completely unprepared for what was coming. It was perfect. We set the date for the following Saturday. I spent the week preparing. I planned a menu, cleaned the house, and bought new serving dishes. On the outside, I was the perfect conciliatory daughter-in-law. On the inside, I was a general planning a battle. I made a few key preparations. I made a high-quality color copy of the entire travel itinerary. I also sent a quick text to Sarah. The dinner is Saturday at 7. I might need you to confirm a story for me if it comes up. Can I count on you? Her reply was instant. I'll be there with bells on, ready to burn it all down. The day of the dinner party arrived. My parents came over early to help me cook. My mom, Helen, could tell something was off. Are you sure you're okay with this? Honey? She asked as we chopped vegetables in the kitchen. After everything that woman has done? I looked at my mom. She had been my rock through all of this. I decided to trust her. I have a plan, Mom, I said in a low voice. I'm not letting her get away with it. I just need you to trust me. And when things get heated tonight, please just follow my lead. She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I've always trusted you, Chloe. I'm on your side no matter what. Soon, the guests started to arrive. Aunt Carol and her husband David were first, warm and cheerful as always. Then Sarah arrived, giving me a small, knowing wink as she handed me a bottle of wine. Finally, Robert and Margaret made their entrance. Robert was his usual quiet, pleasant self. Margaret, however, was glowing. She swept into the house like a queen, giving me an air kiss and complimenting the decor in a way that sounded like she was surprised I had good taste. She was oozing condescension and triumph. She thought she had me beaten. We all sat down for dinner. The conversation was light at first. People talked about their jobs, the weather, a recent local sports game. Liam was relaxed and happy, seeing his two families together, seemingly at peace. He kept smiling at me from across the table, his eyes full of gratitude. It made my heart ache a little. I hated that I had to do this, that I had to blow up his illusion of a perfect family. But it was an illusion built on lies, and it had to come down. I waited until everyone had finished their main course and was sipping their wine. There was a natural lull in the conversation. This was my moment. I stood up, holding my water glass. My hand was perfectly steady. I'd like to say something if that's okay, I said, my voice clear and calm. Every head turned towards me. Liam looked at me with a proud smile. Thinking I was about to give a heartfelt speech about family unity, Margaret had a small, self-satisfied smirk on her face. I wanted to thank you all for coming tonight, I began. It means a lot to Liam and me to have our families here together. Family is so important. It's built on love and trust and honesty. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I looked around the table, making eye contact with everyone. Then my eyes landed on Margaret. Her smirk began to fade, replaced by a look of wary confusion. And that's why I need to talk about something, I continued, my voice hardening slightly. I need to talk about the $50,000 that was taken from our joint savings account. A shocked silence fell over the table. Liam's face went from happy to horrified in a split second. Chloe, what are you doing? He hissed from across the table. We talked about this. This is not the time or place. I disagree, Liam, I said, not taking my eyes off his mother. I think this is the perfect time and place, in front of our family, so that all the secrets can finally come out into the open. Margaret's face was a mask of outrage. How dare you, she said, her voice trembling with manufactured indignation. After I welcomed you into my home, into my family, you bring up this private matter? Liam needed to help his parents with an emergency. A good wife would understand that. Oh, I understand more than you think, I said, my voice dangerously sweet. I understand there was a terrible emergency, with the garage roof, a $50,000 garage roof. Robert looked confused. The garage roof? What's wrong with the garage roof? He asked, looking from me to his wife. I was just in there this morning. It's fine. Margaret shot him a look of pure venom. Robert, be quiet. You don't know what you're talking about, she snapped. Then she turned back to me. It was a structural issue. It's been fixed. Your husband, my son, was a hero. He helped his family. And this is the thanks he gets? You trying to shame him in front of everyone? I'm not trying to shame Liam, I said. I'm trying to understand the truth, because I heard a different story. I heard that there was no roof repair at all. I looked over at Aunt Carol, who was staring at her plate, looking deeply uncomfortable. Then I looked at Robert. Did you authorize a $50,000 repair on your garage, Robert? Of course not, he said, looking completely bewildered. That's a ridiculous amount of money. Margaret, what is she talking about? All eyes were on Margaret now. She was cornered. Her face was pale, and her eyes were darting around the table, looking for an ally. She found none. She's lying, Margaret spat, pointing a trembling finger at me. She's trying to cause trouble. She's been against me from the start. She's turning my own son against me. Am I lying? I asked calmly. I reached into the pocket of my apron and pulled out the folded-up copies of the travel itinerary. I walked around the table and placed a copy in front of Robert. I placed another one in the center of the table. Then maybe you can explain this. Robert picked up the papers. He put on his reading glasses and began to read. The color drained from his face. Liam leaned over to look at the copy on the table. He read the first page and then looked up at his mother, his eyes wide with disbelief and horror. A 3-week first-class tour of Europe? Robert said, his voice a low growl. With Joan Miller? What in the world is this, Margaret? It's just a plan. A dream. Margaret stammered, her composure finally cracking. Something Joan and I were looking at? It's not real. It looks pretty real to me, I said, pointing to the last page in Robert's hand. It says right there, deposit paid, $50,000. Paid via wire transfer. On the exact date the money disappeared from our account. The room was silent except for the sound of Robert's heavy breathing. Liam was staring at his mother, his face a mixture of shock and betrayal. He looked like a little boy who had just found out his hero was a fraud. Mom, he whispered, is this true? Did you take our house money to pay for a vacation? Margaret looked at her son, her face crumbling. The mask was gone. All that was left was a desperate, guilty woman. I was going to pay it back, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I swear I was. I needed a break. I deserved it. You deserved it? Robert thundered, slamming his fist on the table. The dishes rattled. You deserve to steal from your own son? To lie to my face? And who the hell is Joan Miller to be going on a trip like this with you? But I wasn't finished. There was one last piece of the puzzle to put in place. It wasn't just about a vacation, was it, Margaret? I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. This was about more than just money. This was a test, wasn't it? Margaret stared at me, her eyes wide with fear. She knew I knew everything. I turned to Liam. She never thought I would find out. The plan was to cause a fight between us. A fight so big that our marriage would end. She wanted to prove that you would always choose her over me. She wanted me out of the picture. Isn't that right, Margaret? I didn't need her to answer. The truth was written all over her face. I looked at Sarah, who was watching the scene unfold with a grim satisfaction. Sarah, I said, did you or did you not tell me that your Aunt Margaret had a plan to test me and see where Liam's loyalties really lie? Sarah sat up straight. Yes, she said, her voice clear and strong. I did. She told my mother she wanted to see if she could break you two up. That was the final blow. The entire table erupted. Aunt Carol was crying. Her husband was trying to comfort her, looking at Margaret with disgust. Robert was on his feet, yelling at his wife, who was now sobbing hysterically, making pathetic excuses that no one was listening to. And Liam. He just sat there, frozen, in the middle of the wreckage of his family. He looked from his weeping, deceitful mother to me, his calm, resolute wife. He finally saw the truth. He saw who had been fighting for him and who had been using him. I walked over to him and put my hand on his shoulder. He looked up at me, his eyes full of pain and shame. I'm so sorry, Chloe, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I looked at the chaos I had unleashed. At Margaret, broken and exposed. At Robert, betrayed and furious. At the rest of the family, finally seeing the truth they had probably suspected for years. It was a mess. It was ugly. But it was the truth. I leaned down and spoke into Liam's ear, my voice low but firm for only him to hear. This is not over. We are going to talk. But right now you have a choice to make. It is her, or it is me. And there is no going back. He nodded, a single tear rolling down his cheek. I know, he said. I choose you. I will always choose you. I had won. But looking at the devastation around me, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like survival. The dinner party ended in shambles. Robert told Margaret to get her things and that he was taking her home. He said he would call Liam tomorrow to sort out the financial mess. Margaret, sobbing and defeated, didn't even look at me as she was ushered out the door. The other relatives left quickly after, offering quiet, awkward apologies as if they were somehow responsible for the drama. My parents stayed to help me clean up, their presence a silent, solid comfort. My mom hugged me tightly in the kitchen. I am so proud of you, she whispered. That was the bravest thing I have ever seen. My dad just squeezed my shoulder. You did the right thing, Chloe. After they left, the house was eerily quiet. Liam was sitting on the couch, staring into space. The smug, confident man I had married was gone. In his place was someone who looked lost and broken. I sat down next to him, leaving a careful space between us. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he turned to me. His eyes were red-rimmed. I can't believe I didn't see it, he said, his voice hoarse. All these years, all the little things she would say about my friends, my girlfriends, you, the way she would twist things. I always just thought, that's just Mom. I never thought she was capable of something so cruel. She's a manipulator. Liam, I said softly, she's very good at it. She knows exactly which buttons to push with you. She used my love for her against me, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. She used it to try and destroy my marriage, to hurt you. He looked at me, his face full of remorse. And I let her. I helped her. When you came to me upset about the wedding speech, I dismissed you. When you found out about the money, I called you crazy. I defended her lies. I put you on speakerphone to let her humiliate you with another lie. How can you ever forgive me for that? I don't know, I said honestly. This isn't something that just gets fixed overnight, Liam. The trust between us is broken. Not just because of the money, but because you didn't have my back. You chose her side, again and again, until I forced you to see the truth with undeniable proof. He flinched, but he didn't argue. He knew I was right. What do we do now? He asked, his voice small. Now, we set some very clear boundaries, I said, my voice firm. The time for softness was over. This was the time for rules. First, the money. It is to be returned to our account in full by the end of this week. I don't care where it comes from. Robert's savings, her selling her jewelry, I don't care. But it comes back. All of it. He nodded. Okay. My dad already said he'd handle it. He was furious. Second, I continued, we are going to couples counseling. We have a lot to work through, and we need a professional to help us. I am not going to pretend this didn't happen and just move on. Yes, absolutely. He agreed without hesitation. Whatever it takes. And third, I said, taking a deep breath, this was the hardest part. You are to have no contact with your mother. None. No calls, no texts, no visits. Not until the money is repaid. And not until she has sought professional help for her behavior. I want a real apology. Not just for the money, but for the deliberate attempt to sabotage our marriage. And even then, I'm not sure I ever want her in my house or in my life again. That's a bridge we can cross later. But for the foreseeable future, she is cut off. Liam looked pained. The idea of cutting off his mother, no matter what she had done, was clearly tearing him apart. He hesitated. I stood up. This part is not negotiable, Liam. She is toxic. She is a threat to our marriage. As long as she has access to you, she will try to manipulate you. It's her, or it's me. You told me at the dinner table that you chose me. This is what choosing me looks like. He looked at the floor for a long moment. I could see the internal struggle on his face. Then he looked up at me, his eyes clear and resolved. You're right, he said. You're completely right. No contact. I'll tell her tomorrow. I'll block her number if I have to. It was the first time he had chosen me without being forced. It was a small step, but it was a start. The fallout from that night was swift and decisive. The next morning, Liam got a call from his dad. I could hear Robert's angry voice through the phone. After he hung up, Liam came to me, looking grim. The money is being transferred back to us today, he said. My dad went to their bank this morning. He said my mom lost the entire deposit for the trip. It was non-refundable. A small, bitter smile touched my lips. That was a $50,000 lesson. He also said he canceled her credit cards. He's taking control of their finances. He had no idea how much she was spending. And the trip with Joan? I asked. My dad called Joan's son, Liam said, wincing. He told him the whole story. Apparently, my mom had told Joan that my dad knew all about the trip and that it was his gift to her. Joan is mortified and furious. Margaret had not only lost her trip and her money, but she had also lost her friend and her reputation within her social circle. The humiliation would be unbearable for her. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered it cautiously. It was Aunt Carol. Chloe, I just wanted to call and apologize, she said, her voice full of shame. For my sister's behavior, and for my own. I knew she was difficult. I knew she could be cruel. I should have warned you more strongly. I never should have let it get this far. It's not your fault, Carol, I said. She's your sister. I understand. No, she insisted. Family shouldn't be an excuse for monstrous behavior. What she did to you, to Liam, to Robert, it's unforgivable. I just want you to know that David and I are on your side. Completely. If you need anything, ever, you call us. Her words meant more to me than she knew. It felt good to have allies. It made me feel less alone. Liam was true to his word. He started therapy with me. It was hard. There were sessions filled with tears and anger. He had to unlearn a lifetime of conditioning. He had to come to terms with the fact that the mother he idolized was a deeply flawed and destructive person. But he did the work. He listened. He took responsibility for his role as an enabler. Slowly, painstakingly, we began to rebuild the trust between us. He also maintained the no-contact rule with Margaret. She tried everything. She sent him long, rambling emails full of self-pity and accusations against me. She had her friends call him. She even showed up at his office once, but he refused to see her. He was finally building a wall, a necessary boundary to protect our new life. A few months passed. The money was safe in a new bank account that Margaret had no knowledge of. We started looking at houses again. It was different this time. We were a real team. We made every decision together. Liam was more attentive, more considerate. He was finally the partner I had thought I was marrying. One evening, we were sitting on the porch of a house we had just put an offer on. It was a beautiful little place with a big backyard. Our offer had been accepted that afternoon. "We did it," Liam said, taking my hand. "We're finally going to have our home." "Yes, we are," I said, smiling. "You know," he said, looking out at the yard. "I think in a weird way my mom did us a favor. She forced us to deal with all the problems we were ignoring. She showed me how weak I was, and she showed me how strong you are. She tried to tear us apart, but she actually made us stronger." I thought about that. He was right. Her attack had been a trial by fire. It had burned away the illusions and the weaknesses in our relationship. What was left was stronger, more honest, and more real. She wanted to give me a test, I said, thinking back to what Sarah had told me. To see what I was made of. I looked at our joined hands, at the keys to our future that we now held. A deep sense of peace settled over me. The war was over. The battle had been won. "Well," I said with a small, satisfied smile, "she found out I don't fail tests. And she learned a very expensive lesson. When you try to burn someone else's house down, you usually end up burning your own." We were moving forward, and we were leaving her behind in the ashes of the life she had torched all by herself.